So good morning. Thanks. This is the best group yet. This is workshop number 3 of our series this winter. I'm Molly, Operations Manager for MD365, and I have Eliza, our Communications and Development Manager, and Jenny Green from Fisher Green Creative, who's put together a great presentation about social media, how to maximize it for your business and why it matters. And I will just hand it over to her, and I think at the end we'll just wrap it up and fill you guys in on details for the next workshop, which will be in February. More details to come, but with that, I'll hand it to you, Jen.
Great. Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here. My name is Jenny Green. I am co-owner at Fisher Green Creative, and my business partner, Kathy Fisher, and I run a small marketing agency. And my specialty is digital marketing strategy and social media. So I am here today to talk about all things social media. And I have a pretty extensive presentation, hopefully with some really nice takeaway tips and actions that you can go and do today or in the coming year in particular. But what I think might be most effective is if I go through the presentation and then we do the questions and answers and comments and conversation at the end, if that works for everyone. And certainly leave comments in the chat, and we'll go back and review those too. So if that's helpful. So thanks so much for being here, and I'm just going to dive in. A quick overview of today's topics, and not necessarily in this order. We're going to jump around a little bit, but we're going to make the most of your social media marketing, how to create an efficient content strategy, getting to know your audience, and then questions and answers, and then we'll wrap up. Just in case you needed any reassurance that social media is the place to be, here are some numbers that are hard to miss. And it's increasing at about a rate of 3% per year in terms of number of users on social media. So right now, 434 million people just in North America alone. So that's any incentive to getting online and using social media to your advantage. The proof is in the pudding, so to speak. And so there's 4 steps to maximizing your social media strategy. The first one is we want to set goals. We want to identify your audience. So we want to define your brand. And then we want to focus on content planning and production. And so those are the 4 primary areas that we're going to cover today. Pretty much at a bird's eye view, but there are a few things that I'm going to go into a little bit deeper dive. And again, as we go through, if you have questions, be sure to leave those in the chat or save them for the end, and we'll definitely come back to them. So one of the very first things that I always tell our clients when we work with them is to think about changing the word marketing to helping. So when you're approaching social media, if you just have a little bit of a perspective shift, this will really make an impact on how you approach your social media. So I'm always looking at how do we use social media to help our customers, our clients, our colleagues. How can we turn this into something that adds value to the space and that gives us an incentive and helps us make our marketing more intentional. Okay, so first and foremost, let's set some goals. What are we going to do with your online efforts? And a lot of people come to me and say, "Oh, I just want to sell my products. I just need to sell more stuff." But that's not always the end goal. There's so much more value to social media. And what we need to do is tease out what are those things that beyond just the sales that we can gain value to make the time worthwhile and the investment and help the investment see a return. So let's talk about that. You've probably heard this before about making SMART goals, and SMART stands for specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time sensitive. So with any of your social media marketing strategies, anything you're doing online, you want to keep these ideas in mind. And when you're setting goals, it may be sales, and that might be one of them, but let's narrow it down. Let's look at some micro goals through social media. And an example might be a very specific one, growing your Instagram following by 50% this year. That's something that is measurable, so that would be a nice goal. It is attainable because you are obviously here and committed to making sure that you have an effective strategy this year. So making sure that that 50% mark is within the realm of being realistic. So if you had 1 million followers and you wanted to grow that by 50%, that might be a little harder to do than if you have 500 followers, and doubling that, it would be more attainable and more realistic. And then also time sensitive. Are you giving yourself enough time with these goals? So at the very beginning, if you're talking about growing your strategy, adding more content, whatever it might be, is it time sensitive? And have a timeline in mind. Being arbitrary in those goals makes it a little harder to have direction and make your strategy intentional. So you might want to say something like, grow that Instagram account by 50% by December 2023. And that, again, it gives you a deadline. It's time sensitive so that it's not just this infinite deadline that you're trying to reach. And so when we set those goals, we're looking at key performance indicators, and these are called KPIs. They're metrics that you use to measure those goals. And that's just a fancy word for those numbers that you're going to be looking for when you go into your analytics and when you identify what you want to set. And in my world, I have 3 marketing buckets that I'm always looking for when I'm setting goals and using metrics for my social media strategies. And this includes reach, which is awareness, engagement, and conversions. Reach is just getting in front of as many people as possible, helping people get familiar with your brand. Engagement is when people kind of take it to the next step. Your audience is actually commenting and sharing and liking. And then conversions are whatever you set as the end action for your audience. So it might be a sale, it might be an email subscriber, it might be a phone call. But as long as you're keeping these 3 primary marketing buckets in mind, you'll always be able to have an objective and a goal with your social media marketing strategy. Now, this is kind of a fancy spreadsheet that I use, and I use the word fancy lightly because it's just a Google spreadsheet. But what I do here with this, and you will get a version of this after the session, so you can use this and tweak it as you would like. But I just have a DIY tracking system that I use for our social media channels. And this is at the very top, this first bucket is, again, that reach. The second group here is engagement. And then the last one are the conversions. And I actually set up a tracking system for me tracking those measurements. So let's use the Instagram example. So if you want to increase by 50%, at the very beginning, you want to track the number of followers that you have in January. Use that as your baseline. And then over the course of each I'm sorry, I just clicked out of that. Over the course of the month or each month, you want to track that number and just write it in. And are you seeing that growth? Are you hitting that metric and that very specific goal that you set? And you may have multiple goals. It could be growing your followers, increasing the number of people that comment, increasing the number of people that share, increasing the number of people that click from your social media over to your website, sales, anything like that. But as you set those goals, you want to make sure that you have a system for tracking them. And again, something very simple like the spreadsheet would be a great way to start. If you really don't want to do the manual DIY part of tracking your social media, you can always use some third-party tools. Here's a couple of resources for you if you're interested. The metrics that you're tracking are found right in the social media channels themselves. So it's really important, if you haven't already, to get into the back end of your social media profiles to see where are those insights, where are those metrics, and how do I track them. There's great resources for each channel in the help section. But be sure that you're checking like Facebook Insights, the Instagram Insights, TikTok metrics, whichever channels you're using, be sure that you have access and that you're paying attention to those numbers, because by measuring setting your goals and then measuring them as you go through will help your social media marketing be more intentional and also keep you motivated. So if you see those numbers going up as you go, you'll be more inspired to stick with it. Okay, so that's just a quick overview, talking about the importance of measuring your goals and making sure that you have a tracking system in place. It's a kind of a brief section, but just being sure the primary takeaway is that it's really important to set those goals and know what you want to get out of your social media marketing. Again, reach, awareness, conversions, or that engagement, and be sure to measure. Now we're going to talk about your audience. So let's talk about how do you identify them? Who are they and where are they within the social media world, so to speak? The very first thing, if you haven't already, as part of your overall big business plan, is identify demographics, their interests and behaviors, who they are and who they are not. What important topics would they like to be exposed to? What can you share with them? What events matter to them? What problems do they have that you solve? And it's really, really important before you get into social media to understand these needs and this information about your audience segments, because it then dictates what you say and where you say it and how you say it. So fun place to start is identifying the type of shopper that you have. So when you're thinking about people that come into your store or shop online or that you work with or you provide services to, what kind of personality do they have? And it's been narrowed down to a handful of categories. And so I'm just going to share these with you. These are kind of fun. And it's interesting to look at it from this perspective, because you can meet your audience where they are as you identify who they are. So the doorbuster shopper, may the best deals win. The online shopper, the one that's exclusively shopping just online and looking for online services, products, etc. The shopping connoisseur, the one that wants to feel and taste and touch and looking for that experiential buying opportunity. The do-it-yourselfer consumer, adding their own touch. It's important that they have some part in the product or the service, or that they want information. They're very hands-on. The artisan enthusiast, the handmade or local purchases are a real source of pride for them. The conscious consumer, they want to know about. They want to know that their shopping experience really makes a difference. And then there's the holiday overachiever that can be year-round. They've got things planned months ahead of time. They've already got all their Valentine's Day decor out. They already have their summer 4th of July decorations in the bag, ready to go. So these are the ready-to-go happy shoppers. They're just shopping year-round for those holiday events. And then you have your last minute shopper. Oops, I forgot, got to get it in the bag quick. What can you give me? And then the holiday entertainer. And this is the one it's always a season to entertain. So no matter what the time of year, they're always looking for the fun, exciting, kind of the party aspect. So again, it just kind of gives you some shopping mentalities. And so if you start to identify the kinds of shoppers that you typically engage with, or that you see, or that you serve, this gives you some direction about your social media strategy. So next up, using some of that information in mind, it's important to develop those buyer personas. And I always recommend developing just 8 to 10 very simple personas. And these are actual people that might be coming into your store, shopping online. And it's not just a broad, women or men. This is some really specific types of people. And the importance of this exercise in developing the persona is, again, it gives you some insight into the kind of shopper they are, the demographics, the type of messaging that you may need to eventually curate in order to reach them. And then it will also give you some direction as to which platforms might be the best to use to your advantage. And one of the key things to take away is as you're developing your content strategy, is what is valuable to those segments. So as you develop those buyer personas and the personalities of your shoppers, start to think about what is important to them. So let's use gender as an example. If we have a middle-aged mom who's shopping versus a teenage boy who's shopping, there's different things that are valuable to those segments. And so that's why we would want to really think about, like, what is it that's important to them? So while to us as the business, it's important to get our products in front of them, we may need to shift how we present that information based on who they are and what's important to them. And then we also want to meet the audience where they are. Are they a lead? Are they current? Are they just staying connected to your brand? And so I've crafted a list of questions that I think are really important to review and to ask yourself. Again, as you're just thinking about your audience segments and getting to know them and understand who they really are. It's not just this arbitrary person who might find your website online, or it's not the arbitrary person who might just happen to swing by the store. You actually do have really specific intentional shoppers, and the more you can identify and connect with them, the more successful your sales and social media strategies will be. And again, some of these questions or these may be hard to read on the screen, but it will be shared so that you can come back and read them a little more carefully. So just as an example to really hit home the message in this audience segment section is to think about using an example as an organic pet food company. Let's say that's what I am. And my buyer persona might be anyone who has a pet and wants them to be healthier. So that's it's too broad. It does not really give me any direction. And so now if I use that as my buyer persona, then I'm hitting anyone and everyone. I have no real core messaging to take away from this. But instead, if I really add some specific details to this buyer persona, it gives me a really clear idea of how to talk to this particular segment. And it's important to note here that when you're crafting and thinking about your social media strategy and the content that you're going to be producing, not every post has to be for every segment. It's more important to craft multiple posts and multiple types of content and be very specific. So each piece of content that you post on Instagram or Facebook or wherever should really only target one segment at a time. And that way the messaging is relatable, it's personal, it really speaks to that particular person. And if it doesn't hit the mark for another segment, that's okay, because you're going to hit them in the next post. So you can see the difference here between just a very generic persona and then a very specific one. And then if it's helpful, I have a worksheet here to help you organize those buyer personas. What I do here is have a list of questions here on the left, and then I move from left to right. As an example, personality in column 1, let's say I'm a high-end toy maker, and it's the holidays, and I have grandma who's shopping for her grandkids. So she's decision maker 1. She's the one who's shopping for this toy. She may run the idea of the purchase by the mom or her daughter to see if the grandchild might like it. She may even ask the grandchild. So there's a couple of decision makers who may be involved in this process, but for the sake of this example, we're going to use grandma as the primary decision maker. The next section, what does she need to know? What's valuable to her? She may need to know cost. What's the age range of the toy? Is shipping included? How does gift wrapping work? What's the warranty? What's the return policy? So lots of things here that she needs to know that you can use as inspiration for your content as you're crafting social media posts. How do you speak to grandma? How do you get the message across to her? And what do you need to include to make sure that she gets everything she needs? And then as you work through these buyer personas, personality 1, 2, 3, so on, you just repeat this exercise to make sure that you've covered the things that these particular shoppers need to know. And then you're already laying the foundation for really strong messaging strategy, because you know these things that you need to think about to make sure you're conveying and meeting their needs. So from that, if I've done the exercise, maybe again using the organic pet food company, I have the broad post. If I'm using that really broad audience buyers persona, the first one is just kind of this hit or miss, very impersonal caption that might go with the social media post. But now that I know who I'm speaking to, I can really craft and curate a message that speaks directly to that segment. I can really share, a specific comment or a piece that I know that she needs, and then the call to action. I can give her what she wants because I understand her better. And this caption here is really going to speak to that specific buyer. And then again, we're just repeating this process. And it doesn't, after running through a few of these exercises, it doesn't have to be done for absolutely every single piece of content that you produce, but having a foundation to then pull from as you move into your overall strategy. This exercise just helps with that process. Okay, so now what? So we've got their buyer personas. We talked about the audience segments. We know who we're talking to. So the next few steps. Now we need to pick the social media channel that fits the target audience and the message that we've crafted. So we know what they need. We know what we want to say to them. We then need to identify the intended action of the lead or the customer, the connection. What do we want them to take? Then we need to create the digital asset that will convey that message. And so that's the picture or the video or the blog, tweet, whatever it may be. We're now moving into curating that actual asset to post online. You also want to identify your own goal for that message. Do you want reach, engagement, conversion? And then also just confirm that it adds value. Are you, again, giving your audience something that they really want or that they need? And is it consistent with your brand so that they feel comfortable that it's coming from you and that it matches your overall brand identity? And brand identity is just who you are, your colors, your voice, your font, your personality, all the things that make you you. And then also make sure that the messaging and the content, these things that we're putting out there to your segments is timely. You want to allow a window for that messaging to reach its audience. And just a quick side note, there is a statistic that a consumer needs to see something up to 7 times before they'll actually begin registering or thinking about it. And then if it takes 7 times, then you need to allow exposure, those 7 pieces of exposure to happen. So let's say Valentine's Day sale. If you happen to be running one of those, it's coming up very quickly. And so in order to get 7 pieces of content out in front of your audience, it means that we would already really be heavily promoting any kind of upcoming Valentine's Day messaging or specifics. And again, just that lead time between the time you curate the content and the visibility and getting that message to sink in to your audience. So the platforms in a nutshell, there's a really great site called sproutsocial.com that has all kinds of stats. So if you're interested in more of the specific demographics around which platforms have the most females or age groups or things like that, I recommend visiting sproutsocial.com. Again, you can just at the platforms that you might be specifically interested in, you can really dig in and see do the demographics from those platforms align with the demographics of your audience now that you've identified who they are. But just as a quick overview, YouTube is still leader in video content, reach, and brand validity. The YouTube Shorts has actually just hit 50 billion users. So it's really important to that video piece. YouTube is still very relevant. Snapchat, best for targeting teens and influencers. Facebook, great for e-commerce, community building, local businesses in particular. A lot of people feel like maybe Facebook is dying, but if you have a brick and mortar location, I highly, highly recommend a Facebook page because of the SEO value. And by SEO, I mean search engine optimization. It just simply means that it will help you be found in Google searches and other online searches by having that Facebook business page. So it's not dead yet, still very critical part for brick and mortar locations. Instagram, fantastic for e-commerce, trending topics, influencers, again, Twitter, flash announcements, niche topics, edgy conversations, Pinterest, e-commerce, visual brands, boards for inspiration. TikTok is the channel for video, fun, trends, and we'll get into TikTok a little bit more later, but that's the #1 question right now that I'm getting. Do you have to be on TikTok? And the short answer is no. Yes, it is simply taking the world by storm. And from a marketing perspective, it's now outperforming Google in terms of search. And we're now anticipating that TikTok will be the new SEO, search engine optimization strategy, particularly for the younger generations. So as your audience trends younger, TikTok is really going to take the cake. LinkedIn kind of classified itself as a professional site platform for networking, professional conversations. We're now seeing another trend in organic engagement on LinkedIn for all brands. So it's kind of coming, it's finding its little way back into the forefront in a really unique way. And this tends to be more around being a leader in your industry, providing conversations that are maybe a little more serious around your brand, but that are really important, especially as we face economical issues, or dealing with business growth and inflation, things like that. So LinkedIn is is becoming kind of this dark horse from the back that's going to be something to pay attention to in 2023. And then often forgotten are a few of these sub accounts based on your brand or your business. You may find value in really paying attention to these. If you're an author, for example, writer, anything to do with books, Goodreads is still a great place to be engaged and build a community there. House, if you're in any kind of home decor or construction, anything to do with a home or commercial properties, Reddit. You can get lots of conversations going there. Clubhouse, and then the Google Business Profile, which we'll talk about again in a little bit, is also frequently forgotten as a social media channel, but you do have the opportunity to post content on Google. And the value to that is that if you have your business profile and you share business updates or fun content, it actually shows up in the search results in addition to your website link. So it's just another way to kind of put your business a little ahead of the game if you're putting in important updates into your Google Business Profile. So I've also made a couple of sheets here with some housekeeping tasks that I think are really important. So be sure that you're updating your profiles. January, the start of the year, is a great time to just check that all of your information is correct, that your hours are accurate. Be sure that you check your buttons. I can't tell you the number of times that we come across a Shop Now button on Facebook that's the link is broken or something's changed, and businesses are losing the opportunity for a quick click over to their website. If you have an e-commerce website, be sure that you're linking that to your social media channels for this shoppable experience. So you want your consumer to be able to click your product in the post and buy it right from the social media post. And at this point, most of the social media channels have that feature, and it's not just limited to Shopify. You can now integrate pretty much any of the e-commerce platforms with most of the social media channels. Be sure, again, that you update the Google Business Profile. In addition to just the social media aspect and some fun posts that you could add to the profile, it's critical that you keep your business profile up to date. If you're an e-commerce, solely e-commerce platform, you won't be able to do the Google Business Profile anymore. You'll need to switch over to Google Merchant. The Google Business Profile is moving towards a map layout where it wants to be brick and mortar or service-based locations. It's only for businesses that are interacting in person with their customers. The Google Business Merchant is the alternative for e-commerce only sites. So be sure to check out both of those options. And then also check all the maps. If you are brick and mortar, you want to make sure that you're showing up on Apple Map, Bing Maps, Yahoo Business. So there's a couple of places. And again, this is just making sure that your business is visible to directions, phone number, in addition to your website. If you don't want to go in and do all of those pieces on your own, there is a third-party app that I recommend called Moz.com, M-O-Z.com. cont'd.com. And this is a directory listing type of service that you have one place where you enter all of your information, your hours and your website directions, and it will link to all of these different places. And so it's just one option for you to save you a little legwork. Do believe that they've now added a small fee, but don't quote me on that. It used to be that there were some free options, but again, bottom line, make sure that you're checking the maps if you're a brick and mortar location. And then a couple of quick things. Consider an SEO service, because again, the value of being found online in this Moz that I just mentioned is will help with that. So that's again just thinking that you want to make sure that your social media channels are being found, that your website's being found. So it's one thing to do all this great content. It's another thing to make sure that it's actually out there and that people can get to it. So SEO again is search engine optimization. And we really highly recommend, in addition to your social media strategy, pairing that with an intentional keyword strategy, ranking strategy that will get you in front of the right search results. Make sure you get those reviews anywhere and anyhow. Google in particular for e-commerce, in brick and mortar locations, Facebook, Yelp, all of these places. Be sure to collect those reviews, and then don't just leave them online on the platforms. Be sure that you're pulling them into and utilizing them on your website or sharing them in social media posts, so that you can lend some brand validity to the messaging in your content. And then also through your social media strategy, be sure to collect email addresses. It's never too late to do this. So if you set up any kind of Facebook form, or if you have a tab on your Facebook page where people can subscribe, be sure that you're collecting and putting those email addresses into a safe place to utilize later if you're not already building your subscriber list. But social media will be a great way to help you capture those emails. For every $1 spent on email marketing, there's a $42 return as compared to social media marketing. For every $7 spent on social media, for every $1 spent on social media, it's a $7 return. So it's a pretty significant difference between email marketing and social media marketing. So just keeping that in mind, but certainly you leveraging social media to collect those emails so you can do both. And then I think this is a couple more things here, just quickly. Be sure to update and add a privacy policy on your website. This will be important for social media channels too, because in some places when you're working in social media, it will ask you to copy and paste the link for that privacy policy. Also, if you sell online, be sure that you update your terms of service, add shipping and return. Again, social media posts will perform better if your website is in good order. Because these are starting to become required by law in some places, particularly if you're in California, and we anticipate that this will start to move east. So going ahead and if you go ahead and be ahead of the curve by having these things in place, it will help not only your website, but just some liability issues for your business, but then certainly for social media will help improve performance there. So then the key point, we've got all these things happening, all these different channels. We're talking about the different platforms. So in a nutshell, what's going to work best for your business? I would say as a standard baseline, most businesses that I work with that are small businesses in the New England and Maine area use a combination of Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, and Pinterest. Some combination, usually not all, because the bandwidth of most small businesses is pretty small. But if you can use that combination, identify the top channels that work for you, and aim to post 3 to 5 times per week. That would be a really strong strategy for your business. Okay, so next we're going to move into defining the brand, bringing those voice. We're talking about messaging, we're audience segments, and I always waver if I should share this at the very beginning, but I think what I'd like to do is bring this in now as just a quick refresher and reminder that this should, if you're an established business in particular, should already be in place, but let's just take a minute to review, make sure, and then we can move into curating content. But we're defining the brand in this section, and essentially what what that means is we want to know what is the voice of your brand, the tone of your updates, what emotions do you hope to evoke, who are you, what is your personality, what is your business trying to put into the world in front of others, what impressions do you want to make. If you're not actually sure, it's okay to ask, what do people think of you? Ask your staff, ask your friends, like, how do you see my business? What resonates with you? And really clarify this. And again, the exercise behind this is to really define these pieces to make it easier to develop consistent, intentional social media posts that align with who you really are. So putting some really thoughtful time behind these questions will help make in the long run, it'll make it much easier. So your brand identity is made up of your character, your tone, language, purpose. These are just some examples. You might pick a handful of these from each block that really pinpoint who you are. And then you use this to also inspire the kinds of posts and the kinds of language that you're going to use when you're creating your social media posts. And as an example, I have the fun ice cream shop versus the professional medical office. You'll see the difference in the way that I present maybe the potential graphic, potential language in the caption. The ice cream shop may be happy spring, warmer weather can only mean one thing, and it goes on to talk about fun ice cream. Whereas the professional, direct, and more serious medical professional office is going to use that more technical language and be a little more formal. So again, just really understanding what your tone is, your voice, your personality, so that you can then translate that into the message that you're curating on social media. But more than anything, I tell our clients that it's most important to be authentic, genuine, and transparent. So never, ever be anything that you're not. Who you are is amazing, and that's why you're in business, and that's why you're doing what you're doing. So be sure to capture that authenticity. That's what consumers want. They want to know who they're working with, who they're shopping from. So first and foremost, beyond anything else that we talk about, be sure to stick to who you are and be true to your business self. And so then in that light, we're being authentic, but we really want to evoke an emotion from our clients. And so it's also important to think about, as you're working through these exercises, what is it that I'm going to share, or that I'm going to provide that's going to be of value? Most people, if not all people, shop because something that they're buying is going to add value to their life. It's going to improve their day. It's going to improve the efficiency of their work, or if there's a reason. There's always a motivation behind what they're shopping for. And that your job as a marketer for your company is to evoke that emotion and to give that experience to the shopper, to show that that's what they're going to get out of working or shopping from your business. Okay, so in talking about your brand, again, just some more exercises and coming up with language and ideas and laying this foundational work will, again, make the social media posts, when it comes to the nitty-gritty of the daily posting, much easier if we already have some of this language and some of these ideas and concepts in the works. Hopefully, a lot of these things are already on your website. If not, I highly recommend going back to your site and ramping up and vamping up what you're talking about. On a side note, Google, in order to rank a website, requires approximately 300 to 400 words per page. So if you don't have a lot of text on your site, you may want to revisit that because Google needs that text in order to bite into it and then to serve it in search results. So as you're working through this exercise, if it's not already on your website, these are some key things that you want to be sure to include. And then this will also translate into the messaging in your social media strategy. So detailed descriptions about your products and services, detailed mission statement, the key differentiators between you and your competitors, and then also in between your own products. What are the differences between product A and product B, or service 1 and service 2? Make sure that you're really explaining the difference to your consumers. And unfortunately, we always have to assume that they know absolutely nothing. And it's very important to remember that. Never assume that they understand what you're talking about. So be sure that you lay out absolutely every last detail possible, so that you don't leave anyone asking a question. The threshold for clicking and digging for simple information is very low for consumers. They don't like to have to click and look for hours, for example. If they can't see their hours, then they're like, oh, don't bother, I'm going to just move on to the next store. They're very impatient when it comes to things like that. So make sure that you're really including all of the details and information that you possibly can. And then you also want to start developing primary narratives around each of your products and services, and really have kind of an operating guide, so that when you're developing your social media posts later, you have a narrative that you can come back to and pull from and use the same consistent language over time. So you're not reinventing the wheel. Every time you go to do a post, you already have those narratives and concise talking points and any kind of supplemental information, supporting narratives. Again, going ahead and writing that out now, and having that information, again, either on your website or just on a document, will help craft your social media content a little bit later. Be sure that you also have a visual style guide. It's important to lay out your color palette. Make sure you have you've identified the fonts that you want to use, the image style, your logo. Have those things handy. A nice little Google folder or drive on your desktop, with all of this information, so that you have a direction in terms of the kinds of visuals that you want to present as you're developing your social media content. This is invaluable for consistency, being sure that you're developing that experience, that when your shoppers come to your social media channels, they get the same feel, not the exact same experience. You want the pictures to be immersive and diverse, but you want them to know where they've landed at all times, and we want it to be familiar, so that when you're there, you're there, and there's no questions asked. So developing the visual style guide will also help you stay on task and focused with staying close to that mark and being consistent. So again, be consistent. Some design resources. If you're not a graphic artist and the digital asset development is not your thing, there are some really nice resources online. Canva, which is what I've created this presentation in today, is amazing. There's a free version. You can also get stock photography, Shutterstock, Upsplash, StockSnap. There's a bunch of online resources. Google also has some free unlicensed material, but the most important thing, anytime you're developing social media content, is make sure that you do have ownership of the visuals and the assets. You'll run into some copyright issues if you're pulling content from an online source and sharing it as your own. It's okay to share a URL or a link to that content, but you can't just pull a picture and then make a post and use that picture as your own. You need to make sure that you've gone through one of these channels or any approved channel to secure your photography and your graphics. Okay, so now in this last stretch, we're going to dive into content planning. Okay, so we've done a lot of foundational work, so kind of the tedious stuff that's a little overwhelming sometimes, but once we get all of those pieces organized, then we move into actually getting the strategy in place. So let's kind of review where we are. So we've talked about the goals and how they'll be measured. We've decided who we're trying to reach and where they are. We've prepared the brand voice and the visual identity. So now it's time to actually launch the strategies. What are you going to do on social media? And so you are currently right here at step number 4. So I am a huge fan of quality over quantity. So I gave some baseline numbers, 3 to 5 posts per week. But I sincerely believe that if you add higher quality content, it's better to focus on that than just meeting that sheer volume number of posts, and then always be intentional. So again, with each piece of content that you curate on social media, which audience segment is it for, and which marketing objective are you trying to reach? Are you trying to or achieve? Are you trying to reach people? Are you trying to get them to engage, or do you want them to become a conversion? So again, being very intentional with the planning out of your content. So the very first thing I do with clients when we're at this step is to outline 6 to 12 months at a time. This is just a calendar. It is coming up with the holidays that we may want to recognize, blog posts, topics that we want to incorporate. We've identified what's valuable to our clients. So we want to use that as inspiration. What do we want to write about? What do we want to talk about? What are things that we need to put out there in our social media strategy? And so here are just some examples, just a few different ideas from all different industries. In January, if you run a property management company, it might be how to de-ice your driveway. So things that add value to your consumer at the right time of year, things that are important to them, holidays, promotions, if there's a specific product, product launch, new services. Again, having a calendar like this to go ahead and map out as far in advance as you can will really give you that starting point as to when and where you need to place your content. And then again, now that we know what's valuable, what we need our customers to know, then we come up with the kinds of content, some categories. And these are just some suggestions. I generally recommend picking a handful, maybe 4, 5, 6 different kinds of categories, and then just stick to those. You don't have to do everything across the board year round all the time. Give yourself some boundaries so that it feels manageable and then it makes it bite-sized and then it keeps it consistent. So if you, for example, you share industry news on a regular basis, your audience will come to know that you're the go-to source for that kind of news. And then they keep coming back because they know that that's the kind of content that you're going to be sharing. Maybe you share community events. Again, if that's one of your categories and you're consistently posting community events, your audience will come to know that that's what they're going to get and that they should always come to you because you're going to be sharing the information that they need. So again, just thinking about those kinds of categories that will help you develop that consistency. And then it's always fun to piggyback on conversations that are already happening. So with some fun Google searching, you can come up with all kinds of holidays to commemorate anything coming and going. This is leftover from an April calendar I did, some ideas that came up. Depending on the industry or the client that I was working with, I would pick out things that would be relevant. So for example, we have an organic snack stick company that we work with. So we would definitely highlight Earth Day, we would picnic day. We may even do something fun for April Fools because it's a little bit of a lighthearted brand. So we're going to pull out things that are already happening on social media, that already have hashtags, already have conversations that other brands are using, and we're just going to join in on those conversations. So this can be added into your overall social media calendar. So be sure to pen that in your 12-month organization, and then use this to inspire some of your content. And so then, again, I use, when I'm collaborating, I use a really basic editorial calendar to enter the specific day-to-day post. And this is just, as an example, a 1-week window of the date, the category, the copy, the image or the video that I might be using for that day, and then a section for approved or some notes so that if I have a team working on it, we can go back and forth within this calendar. Sometimes our clients just use us to pencil in broad concepts. Sometimes we go all the way down into like the actual specific, like here's everything. Other clients don't use this version, but they find a version that works for them. So it might be that you want to use a different type of editorial calendar, either just within your own, maybe your Google Calendar, Outlook calendar, or maybe you're using a scheduling tool. And this is a great way to also go, and probably my preference, if truth be told, just because you can put everything into one place and it saves the step of having a spreadsheet and then having to transfer it into the channels. Scheduling tools are essentially third parties that you can put all of your content into, connect it to your channels, pick the date that you want those posts to go, and then it will do the work for you. It's one dashboard, so you're not logging into Facebook and you're not logging into Pinterest. You're not, you can do everything from one place. Here are some recommended spots to go. My favorite is Buffer because it has a very low learning curve, very easy to use, very easy to connect. Hootsuite is a bigger, more robust platform, also very easy to use. The Meta Business Planner is limited just Facebook and Instagram, but if those are the two channels that you're using, then that's a really great place to be because then you're working right in the platforms. And later.com is another fun one that, again, these are all third parties that schedule content and you can do your editorial calendar right in them. There's options to create drafts and to save content and then to actually create live posts. This is nice because you can sit down in one go and schedule out weeks and weeks worth of content and let it run. The only thing to remember is that if you do use a scheduling tool, be sure that you're not forgetting the social part. You still need to go back into your social channels and engage and act and be active. If you just push out content and you don't do anything else, then you're really limiting the exposure that you're giving to your social media strategy. And here's a quick checklist. So what is kind of the minimum that we recommend to keep your sites active, engaged, and to really get as much as possible within the limited scope of most small businesses' bandwidth? These are the few things that we would recommend doing on a monthly basis. So following new businesses on Facebook. So as your business profile, you can only follow other businesses. It's limited in interacting with personal profiles, but be sure you're connecting with the community. Follow other companies and engage with them, start conversations, because by engaging with those businesses, your business will show up in front of their audience. So you're helping each other by creating that connection. And then so on and so forth here. Boosting, if you can, it's a pay-to-play kind of game. So if you're able to put $5 or $10 a month towards some content, you're going to see a significant return on that, more so than just organic posting. Blogging is fantastic because it creates a link between your website and social media. It gives your social media users a reason to go to your website, which then increases the likelihood that they're going to start poking around and looking at more content. We're seeing that blogging is probably, aside from just the actual organic posting on social media, is probably the #2 way to really be found and to drive consumer behavior. So we cannot emphasize the blogging piece enough. Fortunately, it's two birds with one stone, though. So if you are writing, you can use that content to then share on social media. So it's if you can squeeze that in, we do recommend it. Continuing with that checklist, repurpose popular content. So I mentioned before that some people need to see something up to 7 times. So be sure to just reshare, use the same content, mix it up a little bit. It's okay to put something out there multiple times in any given post that you present. Maybe only 1 out of 10 people will see it. So that's why it's, even though you might feel like you're being very redundant and it's just like, oh my gosh, I'm doing the same thing over and over. Yes, that's what you should do because that's what the audience needs. So, so don't worry if you're using that same content again. Be sure to check the platform once per month for new features. Every once in a while something will pop up and change, and it's just really important to be aware of what's happening. Check in whenever possible. So use your social media channels to your advantage. It's just so important that that you are engaged in order to get the highest return out of what you're doing. So just a couple of quick trends to be considerate of for the upcoming year. More original, longer form videos and blogs, TikTok, period, LinkedIn for organic engagement, user-generated content. This is when your audience or your followers and your clients are creating content on your behalf. So anytime you can get other people to talk about your brand or to share on their social media channels is going to be a big piece in 2023. the videos, YouTube Shorts, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram. These are the Reels, which neglected to include here, but Reels are critical for Instagram. And then also in your copy, just being sure, remembering that the keywords and SEO is going to be a big piece. So being sure to include language and wording in your post that match what people are searching for. This will be really imperative and critical for aligning content search results with your audience segments. And again, just remembering to put the social back in social media. So you can't just post and leave it. You really got to get out there and network and engage to really maximize the impact. I'm going to I'm keeping an eye on the time. I've got a few minutes left. I'm going to try to zip through these last couple of slides. I just have a handful more and then wrap up if that's okay. Another question I get are hashtags. They are important, particularly for Instagram, not so much for Facebook and Pinterest as much. TikTok, yes, but as a standard basic approach, there's 3 types of hashtags: the community hashtags, and I'm just using Instagram here as an example, but you may find things that are just Instagram community, like what are people sharing in the Instagram world around that subject matter. Branded hashtags, so it might be that they're specific to your business name, and then campaign or an event hashtags. So if you were or if you had a webinar that you were presenting, you would do the hashtag and then the actual name that campaign. And then anytime you post about that, then it's showing up in that search result, and people can find those posts really easily by using that hashtag. So again, those are the 3 types of hashtags that I generally use. I recommend using approximately 8 to 10 per post. And I'm going to just skip over it just for the sake of time. But here's some hashtag tools. If you need some inspiration or want to look at the data, you can find third-party tools to give that research to you. The platforms themselves also have hashtag inspiration. So on the previous tab, for example, and if you're opened, if you have Instagram open on your mobile, if you go to search, the little search button, it'll bring up a tag section, and you can search some tags there that are popular, and it'll bring that up. So do a little research around hashtag use and the numbers, because it is an important factor for, again, these are keywords. Hashtags are simply another word for keywords that will help your content show up in search results. And then the bottom line is essentially what you put into your social media presence is essentially what you'll get out of it. So all of these pieces, you can pick out what's most important to you, but just remembering that to manage the expectations that what you put in is exactly what you're going to get out, and then some. And I think we're now to the questions and comments. So I kind of flew through that last little part, but happy to revisit anything.
Thanks so much, Jenny. Yeah, does anyone have any questions or comments? I know Catherine Emery had to leave early, and she left a nice comment in there. But does anyone else have any questions for Jenny? Well, like we said, we will be sending out the recording so that if you want to rewatch it or share it with someone on your team that you think that wasn't here and wanted to take a look, you can certainly do that. We are going to be having our next installment of this series in February, on February 22nd at the same time from 8:30 to 9:30. And it's going to be on Canva, which Jenny nicely teed up for us, mentioning a couple of times. I know I use that tool about every week for my social media content for MD365. And back when I was doing freelance work for businesses, that was something I used all the time for them too. So I know it's really helpful, but it can be a little overwhelming. So we're going to go through some of the basics of it and answer any questions about that and how it relates to your business. So again, that's going to be Wednesday, February 22nd at 8:30, and we'll send out more information leading up to that, like we did for this one. But other than that, any last questions or comments? Seeing some nice stuff coming in the chat. So really appreciate that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining. If any of you think of questions specific to this presentation after the fact too, feel free to email them to us and we can pass them on to Jenny and make connections as well if anybody wants to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, if that's it, then thank you all so much for your time. Thank you so much, Jenny. That was amazing. And we so appreciate your time and all the energy that clearly went into creating this presentation. It was wonderful.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
It was great to see you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thanks all.
You too. Thanks everybody for joining.